Can you tell me what I'm about to do? Am I about to skydive? Am I about to freebase? Am I about to jump out of an airplane? It's all gonna be good, America. Stay tuned. Watch what's about to happen next.
There's a lot said about the prodigal son, and that's important stuff, but it's just as important to consider what happens when we have a prodigal father.
How's everybody doing?
Hey.
You all right? That sounded a little bit weak. Let's do a Pruitt hand clap. Come on, who's got it? Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. All right, that's good, that's good. Yeah. Who'd I get yesterday, man? I said, let's do a one hand clap. Who'd I get? I got Chris, man. He had his arm around that fine young man there, and he, yeah, I ducked, man, but he tried. That's a man right there, man. That was crazy. All right, well, one of the things we heard before from Mr. Pruitt, we heard about the prodigal, what? Prodigal son. Anybody remember what prodigal meant? It meant wasteful. Excellent. Wasteful. Yeah, it's not, I always thought prodigal just meant he went away. That's not it. It's wasteful. And what was the issue that Mr. Pruitt talked about? What was wasted that was really important? Time. Time. Yeah, that was key. And I just want to share with you very briefly, guys, that not only are there prodigal sons, but there are prodigal fathers. There are way too many prodigal fathers in the world today. Now that does not include you men, because you are here with these beloved young people, some of them biological and some of them spiritual sons. But there are way too many. And what's fascinating is, if you think about what Brian had shared earlier, the other day, the issue wasn't that son was just born and somehow crawled away. That young person had lived for a period of time under his father's roof, and one day, a series of thoughts combined and added up and multiplied. In one day, he said, I'm out of here. Okay, see, he didn't wake up one morning and go, everything's been wonderful, I think I'll just go screw up my life today. That didn't happen. So it was a cumulative effect. Here's what a man has to be very careful of, is that the cumulative effect of life doesn't cause you to just keep adding and adding and adding to burdens and stresses and disappointments and things that you ain't happy about, and you're mad at your wife, you're mad at this person, you get bugged at your kids, you're tired of work, etc., and it just adds up, and you're not saying anything. You're not reaching out to other men. You're not sharing your heart, getting wise counsel, and so you're your own counselor. There are many times I've been my own counselor, and I'd have to say I was assigned a fool as a counselor. Because my thinking was stinking. It was bad. And I'm like, you know what? There's got to be an easier way to do this life. I remember the days of doing ministry and running a business and taking care of my home and changing diapers and raising 4 kids. And there were just some days, let me be real honest with you, it crossed my mind. It crossed my mind how much fun it was when I was 30 and single. Oh man, I did what I wanted. I fished all day. I partied all night. Come on now. How about maybe we just drift back a little bit? Thankfully, those thoughts are fleeting. But for some, they're not. For some, the thought is, but remember how good it was when I didn't have all the responsibilities and the pressures. Oh man, it was just so good. And what we're really saying is, remember when I could be totally stinking selfish and do whatever I wanted to do, when I wanted to do it, how I wanted to do it. That's not good man thinking. Now, I wrote a story one time, made it into one of my books, and just see if this makes sense. It's the 180 from the prodigal son. Let me just read it to you. There once was a home filled with a father and a mother and a son and a daughter. One day, father left a note on the refrigerator saying, "Family, I'm tired of this life. I have quit my job and I'm leaving to find happiness." He cleaned out the family bank account. He grabbed the credit cards and he left home. Anxious for a fresh start, father took the minivan the family had and he traded it in on a super duper sports car. Without ever looking back, he took his shiny car and he headed down the road to a faraway city. And there he checked into a fancy 5-star hotel. And 2 porters carried his new leather luggage up to the top floor. Oh my, he's got it made. And looking out over the city lights, the father nodded and he thought, now I will be happy. So he put on one of his brand new suits and he just smiled. And he said, now there are no diapers to change. I don't have to mow the lawn. I don't have to worry about the bills. There are no messy kids clamoring for my attention after I come home from a hard day's work, and I deserve my time. So now he enjoyed a steady diet of rich foods. He would hang out at the bar late at night, and beautiful people came around him. Beautiful young ladies and fancy friends, and they just had a marvelous, marvelous time. All those new friends were eager to tell him how wonderful he was. Of course, he was paying the bills for them. He was the one buying the drinks and the food and setting them up. But it was a real deep friendship, now wasn't it? However, after one particularly riotous night of partying, father saw the reality of his new life. His head ached, his credit cards were maxed out, and all of his money was gone. To make matters worse, that fancy hotel kicked him out because he couldn't pay his bills, and they kept all of his new suits. Instantly, his new shiny car was repossessed because he couldn't pay for that either. But he knew he could count on his new friends and those beautiful young ladies that hung out with him, except when they found out he had no money, they left as well. Strange, strange. And as he thought about those beautiful people, he realized that the hollow eyes and the lack of a real smile, except when they were high or drunk, suggested that their life wasn't that wonderful. But unfortunately, the realization came too late in his life. And he realized that there he was. He was hungry and he was thirsty and he was alone. He had nothing left, and he thought, how I long to be at my family's table, where the meals are not fancy and the food is not rich, but yet there's fellowship there and there's a wife and children that love me greatly. How I long to be there. How I long to hear the sound of my children's laughter one more time instead of this loud music that seems to drown out my thinking. Well, a tiny spark of hope flashed in his heart. And he thought, I've failed them and I cannot be forgiven, so perhaps it's better if I simply die. But perhaps there's hope. Confused, the broken man did the only thing that made sense. He lowered his head and he began the long walk home. When the father was yet far off, his wife and his children, they saw him. They had been watching down the road for their father to come home. And instead of rejecting him, they ran to him. And they threw their arms around him, and the children hugged his waist. And they said, Father, welcome home. Welcome home. And he was once again reunited with his family. And then life was good. Guys, fathers are people too. Fathers make mistakes. Fathers get it wrong. Fathers wander away. Fathers are enticed by the things of the world that seem as though they offer great life, and yet they will leave a man empty. And when a father is in that place and it seems like there is no hope, what must happen is the son, the daughter, must pray him back home. And when you see him coming down the road, it is not time for condemnation. It is not time to point the finger. It is not time to scream in his face and explain all the bad things that he's done, because if he's coming home, he understands. It is the time to welcome Father back home. My encouragement to every son that hears my voice is this: let your father just be a man. He is not perfect. He has made mistakes. But if you see a glimmer, an image of him coming back to you, open your arms and welcome him home. Amen.
You know, after about 30 years of working in ministry, I've learned that guys love to be part of a ministry team. And what better way to do it than to share a shirt that bonds us all into one great team. Hey, with this group, there are certain things that I know are just going to be an absolute riot, and the zip line was no exception. And our zip line spokesman, Chris, is so funny and sets the whole thing up. It's just hilarious when this guy gets going.
Can you tell me what I'm about to do? Am I about to skydive? Am I about to freebase? Am I about to jump out of an airplane? I am getting ready to climb a ladder, get on a platform, hook myself to a wire, lunge off, and swing to the other side. But guess what? I gotta go through some treacherous water, lily pads. It's all gonna be good, America. Stay tuned. Watch what's about to happen next. I'm actually climbing to probably about, I don't know, 30 feet in the sky. Feel a lot of wind, feel a lot of movement in the trees. What I'm about to attempt, please don't try this at home. Well, America, first time I'm getting ready to zip line. It's gonna be pretty amazing. Take a ride with me. Just go.
It's got you.
It's got me?
Yep.
Okay.
Wow.
Hey man, that was awesome! I jumped off a 30-foot platform with a harness, a piece of metal hanging to me, holding my body weight. Okay, I know I'm big, but I'm telling you, I enjoyed it so much going down that zip line. It was awesome. It was awesome. Up here at Lake Timber.
You know, I was so excited to have Jody Bass back with us for season 2 of TV4DADS. He was with us on season 1. He was an absolute riot. He was the last guy that I invited to come on season 1. And I didn't know how it was going to work out. I didn't know if he was going to enjoy it, if guys were going to connect with him. He was instantly connected with many of the men that came to season 1 when we were in Montana. And he was hilarious. The guy was fun. He was exciting. We're up at this high rocky mountain lake, and next thing I know, he's down to his shorts. I mean, that water's freezing, and he's doing backflips into the water. But just the time that you think he's just this wild and crazy guy, he'll bring a message. He'll bring something deep in his heart that is very, very powerful. And I wanted him to be with us on season 2, but I also wanted him to be able to speak to the guys, because he's got a message worth hearing.
I grew up in a broken family. I grew up with a mother and a father, separate extreme differences. I was in church as a young guy. My life started to kind of go a little bit different when some things happened to me as a child. I was molested. I was taken advantage of. I lost my innocence. I actually lost, in that time, I lost how to have relationships, how to identify with people, how to connect with people. I was strong into the church at the time, and what I did is I didn't understand love. I didn't understand what it was that I was learning at the church, and I chose an offense. Now, when I say that, I say I was looking for a way out. I was looking for a different place. And one thing happened, and I chose that offense, and I ran with it as hard as I could, and I left the church. Now, I tell you that because people say they get offended and they leave. You know, they leave because of an offense. I left because I wanted to be offended, and I did. And when I left the church, I went all after it. You guys have met me. You guys have seen me. I go extreme when I go. And when I left the church, and I went extreme when I went. My life became about girls, was my biggest thing. I did not respect women. I used women. I was an abusive boyfriend, and I didn't know how to handle that relationship. And I got heavy into drugs. I started out, I was a skateboarder at the time. Grew up doing it. I was extreme. I was extreme at everything I did, and when I chose drugs, I went extreme into drugs. My life was full of marijuana, was full of taking acid and going on binges for days. It was marijuana, it was cocaine, it was soon crack. My life soon became about jail. It became about being locked up. So I had this image that I had to uphold. I was deep into drugs. I was deep into women. I was deep into abusing women. I was deep into taking what I wanted and doing what I wanted to do. So drugs and alcohol captured me. Jail was soon to follow. Many years of my life have been behind bars and behind people that cared about me. Just people that were in the same boat that I was in. This lasted for years of my life. I got in trouble. I had a home invasion and a larceny charge that put me, it was a 15-year felony. I'd served a year of that. And during the time I had gotten out on a technicality, and I only had to serve a year of that. And during that time, my 5-year probationary period, when I came out, I met my wife. Now, I was heavy into stuff at that time, but through me wanting to please her and wanting to get my relationship right and figuring out how to do that, I decided I was going to kick everything. I kicked everything, mostly because I was having to take drug tests every week, but I kept my alcohol. And I kept it, and no one was going to take it away from me. My relationship with my now wife was abusive. I wasn't physically abusive, but I was verbally abusive. I did everything I could to make her feel small so I could feel big. I put her down at every chance. She was the butt of every joke that I had. And I took what I wanted from her. I got in trouble and was kind of working my way out, and we had gotten pregnant with my oldest son, who's here with us. And I decided it was going to be my changing point, because I wasn't going to do what I had seen. I was going to make a change, but I kept my alcohol. Got good jobs. I stayed steady with that. We got opportunities. We moved to Florida. We'd done a lot of things. I kept my alcohol. We moved to Georgia. We had some opportunity, and life was going pretty good. I was doing pretty good at understanding the way to treat my wife. I wound up getting in an accident in a car, being drunk. I was wasted. I hit an elderly couple going about 60 miles an hour, never touched my brake. While I was intoxicated, my wife thought I was at work, and I was out drinking, which I did often. I called my wife after I had pushed the car into the ditch and took off. Called my wife while I was being chased down the road to tell her that I was about to go to jail and I may not ever get out. Her response is, "You better be joking with me. You better be joking. If you're not joking, we are done." I'm sorry, babe, I can't say I'm joking. I got lights behind me right now, and my radiator isn't, I'm wearing the antifreeze. So I stopped. I went to jail in Savannah, Georgia, and I realized in all my time in jail throughout my life, in Savannah, Georgia, I did not intimidate anybody. And at that point in my life, for the first time, I wasn't even willing to try. I got a prophetic word from the Potter's House in Mount Pleasant, Michigan, called me in Georgia and said, "Pray that they will lose your paperwork." Now, I have been in jail enough times, I've been in court enough times to know that paperwork does not get lost in dealing with the system. At least it had never with me. I sat in the courthouse. My wife had dropped me off in Savannah, Georgia at the courthouse to let me go for the rest of my life. At this point, I have 2 children in my life. I sat in that courtroom all day long. The prior week, I had just prayed. We found a little church, and I said, "God, I know that you have a purpose in my life." I knew my entire life. I remember being just wasted, drunk, and being stoned out of my mind, and telling my wife at the time, "I'm going to be a pastor someday. I'm going to speak to thousands because it's in my heart. I'm going to be on that stage, not because I'm big-headed, because I want it, because it's the desire of my heart, and I know God has a stage for me." And she would laugh. She would laugh. "You're telling me you're going to be a pastor, man. You can't even stand up on your feet." She dropped me off that day to go to prison for 15 years of my life. I sat there all day long. The blocks went. My lawyer kept looking at me. I don't know what to tell you. All of a sudden, he comes and grabs me, calls me out in the hallway, and he says, "Sign this piece of paper. Don't say a word. Sign the paper. Go back in the courtroom." I signed a piece of paper. I walked back in the courtroom. The judge called my name up and said, "Mr. Bass, I don't know what happened. We can't seem to locate your paperwork." I walked up. To the front of it. He said it was a DUI and leaving the scene of an accident were the 2 charges I was going to get charged for. He knew I had already been in jail. He gave me time served, asked me if there was anything I wanted to say. I said I gave my life to Christ 1,000 times before in my life, but this time I mean it. Whatever God has for my life, this is what I'm telling the judge, whatever God has for my life, I'm going to do it. And he said, okay. I turned around, time served, I had probation. I had to do a lot of fines and a lot of schooling and stuff I had to do. I went to turn around, I almost made it to the probate door to go in and sign my paperwork and stuff, and I heard a Mr. Bass. I turned around, the judge says, please approach my desk. He sat there, proceeded to tell me that just after he had given me the sentence, they had found my paperwork, and he was furious, absolutely furious. But he said he couldn't do anything about it because I was already tried. My heart was this big around with fear, joy. I had asked him previously if I could have my probation transferred to Michigan. He had denied that. He said I could not. I had to stay in Georgia because I knew my wife was destined for here. He turned around and he said, I don't know what God you're serving. I don't know what's going on, but he said, I'm mad for the rest of the day. Whatever God you got, you better hand out to the rest of these guys because everybody's getting hammered because of you. And he said, I'm going to tell you right now, whatever God you're serving is looking out for you, and I'm going to grant you your probate. You can do it in Michigan. And you had a Florida license when it happened. You'll be driving within 2 years. He let me walk out of the courtroom that day. When I called my wife and told her that I was home, she was mad. She was mad. She wasn't happy with me. I went home, I smashed my beers out of the fridge. I apologized on my knees. I asked my wife's forgiveness. And my 2 children were just babies at the time. And I said, I'm going to change my life. I came back to Michigan on my probation, was able to do all my probation, and I got into school. I went to a Bible school at the Potter's House, went and did my 2 years worth of schooling, and 4 years made it through that portion of life. I stand before you a man who should be nowhere. And all those times in my life, I should be dead. I should be in prison. I should be on Skid Row. I should not be here. But there's a God up there that has so much grace and so much mercy and so much drive for my life. His success, his idea of success for me overrode everything that I tried to do in my life. So I stand before you today, an ordained pastor, a pastor. I say before you a father of 3, a husband, and a man with purpose, a manager in his field. And I get to share my testimony with you guys and with everybody out there watching. And I say, man, you talk about a redemptive purpose. And the coolest part about the entire thing was I didn't ask to be redeemed. And there were multiple times in my life that I didn't want to be redeemed because I didn't think I was worth it. I didn't think I was worthy. But God has done something in my life, so I'm here sharing you my life. What once was is no more. And what's yet to come, I can't wait. Thank you guys.
Feels like rivers have flooded from my eyes as I'm changed into a better man. I look up to the stars and know it's time to head back east.